Today we have Jerry Bastian, who's put together a presentation, and we'll begin here shortly. But a couple of housekeeping items. We have everybody muted, and videos will be shut off when we start the presentation. And we have a question and answer session. If you move your mouse, you'll see an option for question and answers, and we'll have a brief time at the end to try and address those, and then we can read them aloud so everyone can hear them. But we'll be collecting the question and answers throughout the presentation. Please submit them that way. Again, thanks for joining Next I.T. in our security bootcamp. Let me hand it over to Jerry Bastian.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. I am trying to move the slide deck right now and having a little bit of a trouble, so I'm going to quick bounce out and reload it for us. And then we'll get started here. All right, great. So I'll try to move through this fairly quickly this morning, because I know I promised everybody a half hour, and make sure you're not late for your lunches today. But I want to start out just by telling you a little bit of a story about my first job in IT. I'm going to date myself with some of the technologies that I'm talking about, but I wanted to just share real quickly about it. So I was a night batch operator. And so what I did was I came in at 5 o'clock after the end of the business day, and we had a digital mainframe that I would work on in the evenings. And so I had really two jobs. The first one was to do a backup of all the data from the day. And so I would take these, they called them a RLO2 disk pack, which was about the size of a 14-inch pizza. And it was metal. It was about 2 inches thick, had a plastic cover on the top, and then like a little handle, like a briefcase. And I would put those into the disk drive. And the disk drive was about the size of a top loader washing machine. And I would load that up, and I would do, first thing what I do is back up all the files. And we had about 6 of those packs, and to back up the data. And then after that, what my job was to start running reports from the day. So it was all the accounting reports and sales reports. And I had one of those really nice original dot matrix printers that had the floor stand, you know, the green and the white paper and the perforated sides. And I would run reports until 2 o'clock in the morning. It was a pretty exciting job, as you can tell, sitting by yourself, running reports all night. But I would say that the data requirements were pretty simple for me. And that was do the reports and don't lose the data. Over and over again, that was what my boss would tell me, was that if I wanted to keep my job, then my job was to not lose the data. And so all I had to do was put those packs in a safe to lock them up and make sure I locked the data closet when I was done. And I left the building at 1, 2 in the morning after running all these reports. And that was the expectation of me. And when you think about it today, as complicated as our job environment is, the job really is still the same, right? Don't lose the data. And so one of the problems that we have in our industry right now is that with our rapid race to increase the access to data, the types of devices where we get the data, and the locations where we need the data, we've really caused a problem, because we've really got ahead of ourselves in the development of the access to the data versus the protection of the data. And so while most of you are focused on running a business that's not related to IT, IT and security has become a much bigger part of your life over the last several years. And we're obviously seeing more and more the attacks to that data, right? So as we expose our data to more locations, more devices, and more people, there's more increases of threats, and those threats are increasing on a daily, hourly, minute by minute basis. Also, the tools are really, sophistication is really increasing the tool set. And so it used to be a lot of the attacks were on larger companies, government databases, large retailers, and those types of folks. And now, because of the sophistication of the tools, there's a lot of small businesses and medium businesses that are now under attack as well. And so the basic security layer that we used to have, it's no longer about keeping the data in the safe and in the locking the door at night. It's really about a constant monitoring and a constant management of the data, making sure that every place that data is moving, no matter what time of day it is, where in the world it is, that is protected. Some interesting facts that I pulled up for us today is that more Americans right now are worried about being a victim of cybercrime than being a victim of violent crime. And so as people expose their bank accounts and online shopping and all those types of things, and seeing the number of attacks that happen, there definitely is a growing fear of the loss of that data and the costs that go along with that. There were more than 1.76 billion records leaked in January 2019 alone. That's a pretty staggering number when you think about the types of records that we keep as far as customer data and financial data and business data. Ransomware cost businesses and organizations over $11.5 billion in 2019. And one of our most favorite applications, Microsoft Office, the extensions that go along with that are used for some of the most malicious file extension attacks by email hackers out there. Some more data I just wanted to share with you is that nearly 60% detected one or more types of cyber attacks last year. And those are just the ones who detected it. 11% said they had actual cyber theft, and 24% had some type of security incident. And when I look at that data, it's pretty staggering in itself. But the other things that I thought about when just reading through this as I was putting this together is how many companies didn't even detect attacks because they don't have the proper security, the monitoring, the remediation tools available to them. So if 60% are catching it, how many people out there, including some people here on this call today, how many of you are not even realize that you actually have people trying to attack your businesses? I also thought about how many more companies were attacked and didn't report it, right? Because it talks about the level of reporting not being very high. And so you look, if you're looking at over 60% of our companies are being attacked, that's again very staggering. And then once you're attacked once with success, or some kind of success by a cybersecurity hacker, you're on the hit list. And that's something that we've seen in a lot of our companies and a lot of our businesses is that once you have an incident, it seems to be that the number of threats increases over and over again. And in these statistics, it even talks about the fact that there are half of the people that were victimized detected 10 or more incidents during the year. So you're getting to the point where you're almost talking about a major cyber attack once a month. Just real quick, I wanted to share some of the percentages of the types of attacks that are going on. And malware is definitely by far still the greatest attack that we experience, although there are some account hijacking, credential stuffing, and some other types of as well. But really in your business, if you're really focusing on malware and the malicious scripts and things like that, you're going to be covering a major part of the attacks. And so everything is a cost benefit analysis, right? And so my recommendation to a lot of my clients is that if we focus on the malware and those types of attacks at first, and then we can then we can target more of our security offerings down. But a lot of people aren't even dealing with the malware attacks right now, and the base layer of protection that we used to call a base layer of security, it just isn't enough anymore. And so we have to really start talking about what's next. I wanted to share that basic information for me today just to start thinking about security, but really we need to talk about it from a serious threat standpoint. And this is something that the reason we put this webinar together today is that we're getting to the point where we really need our customers to work with us to start taking action on some of these things because these are actionable items now. The threat is really at our door. I know that several years, let's say 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, again, a lot of the larger companies, the larger retailers, the government were some of the primary targets for attacks. But in today's world, the small businesses are just as much under attack as the large businesses. And so we need to have those layers of protection here as well. The threat is right at your door now, even if you don't know it. And we really need to start locking the door, right? And doing a better job of protecting our data again. I want us to have some time today just to take some kind of set aside time to think about that. I know that there's a lot of things going on right now that are distracting us, but this is also a very important part of your business. And so as you start coming back to work from the COVID, or if you've already been working or whatever, it's something that we want to start working through with you and firming up our security platforms. This is a really serious issue, and I want us to all start taking it more seriously. All right, so let's get into some of the technologies that we're going to look at today. These are some of the base layer security opportunities that we have that many of them you're aware of already, but we have to start doing some tightening down, like I said before. Let's start out with complex passwords. I think everybody here knows what a password is, and most of us know what a complex password is, right? We're using symbols and numbers and combinations of those things to make it harder for our passwords to be hacked. The problem is that, you know, in our world today, it's very hard across an organization to get a consistent password policy implemented and used. And if you've got one or two users that are not following your password policy, then you still have vulnerabilities in your entire business. And so when it comes to complex passwords, it's really important that we start documenting with policies and standards, that we start having opportunities for training for those who need help with complex passwords, and setting those policies in a way that really forces the user base to change those passwords when it's time, to make sure they're using the right complexity in their passwords. I think about my first job, and the administrative password was admin and the password was admin. And I know that makes probably a lot of you laugh, but maybe a lot of you still are using something that simple today. And we see it all the time. And that really comes down to the second thing I've got on here is banned passwords. In technology today, you're starting to see the technology help you with people and their passwords, and not using those simple phrases and those simple things that can be very easily hacked. And so you'll see it a lot of times in your new technologies where there are banned passwords. So it no longer allows you to use the admin or the pass 1, 2, 3, 4, or the things that we've all used in the past. And it's very important that we implement that as a part of our technology strategies so that we can have enforcement of that as well. Policies and standards are very important, and if you do business with Next I.T, you've probably already seen this before. I think we sent out to all of our clients earlier in the year, and we actually have a documented password policy and standard that you can go by to start implementing those password policies as well. And if you need some help, obviously we're here to help you with that. But one of the things that Duo, which is a 2FA MFA product line, recommends is that you have what they call password policy parties, and basically having some sessions with your users to make sure everybody understands what those policies are, knows how to use the tools, and understands that if they go over the 60 days when your password's going to expire, if they ignore those alerts that your password's going to expire, you're going to have an administrator get a reset. And that's for security purposes, to make sure people are changing those passwords on time. And so very important to have a documented password policy. Many companies are now including it in their HR policy packets, so that people understand that their data usage and their password usage and the things that go along with logging in and accessing technology in the company is a very serious thing. Moving on to the multi-factor authentication. A lot of you have heard about things like Duo. A lot of you, I think, are using some of Microsoft's tools. Very important to start implementing multi-factor authentication into your environments now. There's a couple different components to that. All multi-factor authentication are based on having 2 or more pieces of evidence or factors, right, to give authentication and access into the software applications that you're trying to protect and into your environment. And so the first piece of an MFA tool is knowledge, right? Knowledge is something that the user and only the user knows, right? So it's going to ask information about that person's personal information so that they can verify that it's who it is. The second part of an MFA tool is possession. And that also is something that the user and only the user has, right? So if the MFA tool is sending a text, it's going to the phone that only that person has, and those types of things as well. And then the third part of a multi-factor authentication tool is inherence, right? Inherence is something the user and only the user is, right? So it's a very personally identifiable factor. So the person can put in, secret keywords or secret answers to questions, birthdays, mother's maiden name. You've seen all those things when you go to log into your bank accounts and everything. And so the multi-factor authentication really is now part of a basic layer of security. If you're not using MFA right now, then you should be. And you're going to see, I'll talk about it later on, that we're adding those things as basic components to our packages for service and maintenance and security, because it really is probably one of the best tools that we have right now to block authentication. And so even at Next I.T, when I'm working from remote or from home, I use a VPN connection to get into our network, and it asks me for authentication information when I log into the VPN by generating a code on my cell phone. And then when I go into my pricing tool that I do your quotes for and everything on, then it also will then send a ping back to my phone asking me to verify that it's me, and I'll do that as well. So we actually have a couple different ways we access our systems. And some information that Keith passed on to me here a couple weeks ago, just some data. It was 99.9% of compromised accounts did not have any multi-factor authentication on them. And then only 11% of organizations have said that they actually have enabled the technology. And so when you look at the minimal number of compromises that you have when you implement this technology versus the number of companies that have actually implemented it, pretty staggering. And so that's one of the messages I really want to push forward today with a strong message, is that we really have to start using MFA. And for those of you who aren't already, want to start working on that right away, because that is one of your key critical base layer kind of security offerings that they have now that we really want to take advantage of. And then the last thing on the passwords and logins I want to cover is the single sign-on and the password managers. So a single sign-on is really just an authentication scheme, and it really allows a user to log in with a single password to any of several yet very independent systems, right? So it's basically you have a single password for access to multiple systems. A term that you might hear more often now is Ldap, which stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, for those of you who enjoy the acronyms, LDAP. And there's also Ldap databases that store that information as well. So most of your single sign-ons products will work with that Ldap protocol. And the nice part about it is that with a single sign-on, your users don't have to remember so many passwords, right? So they can access multiple systems with one password, and that really protects your security, because as you know, when we all have too many passwords, we start writing them down, putting them on sticky notes on our PCs, saving them in spreadsheets on our systems, that if they get hacked, then the person has the entire list of the passwords for that user and all the things that we all need to do because our memories are not perfect, right? And so I'm certainly one of those people where having a single sign-on and a password manager is definitely a great tool for me, because I don't tend to remember passwords very often, and I have a lot of them to change. So, and a lot of you guys do as well. So a password manager is an additional tool to integrate in with your systems, and those really offer a lot of security and convenience for everyone, because in that situation, you're actually able to go into the password manager through a single password again, so it's still a single sign-on opportunity, but then you can regenerate passwords for your other systems automatically. And so not only will you be able to have your users generate complex passwords very quickly and efficiently, they can go into the system still through the single sign-on, and that gives you that extra layer of security. I know that some of you we've been talking about things like LastPass. Duo has some capabilities inside of it. So I'm a big fan of the Duo product, as you probably are picking up on already. And it really just, enhances your ability to enforce and get your folks to comply to the policies and standards that you're trying to execute in your organizations, because with that password manager, the user is much more likely to be successful. They're going to have less, forgot password refreshes and all the things that really annoy the user base. And so having that password manager is really a convenience for the user, and it's an improvement of security for you. So most of the password managers and single sign-on products are not very expensive. And so that's the nice part about it is for a little bit of investment, you can really get a great return on security. That's all I really wanted to cover on the passwords and logins. If you have any questions about that, please go into the chat and start typing them in, and we'll capture those for the end. So the next layer of security that I want to talk to you about today is really antivirus. And there really are two forms of antivirus that are being identified in the industry now. One is a basic antivirus protection, and the second is what they call an advanced antivirus protection. And those products are just kind of starting to emerge over the last year or two. And there's a really big difference in the two of them. I want to make sure that you all understand the difference. Most of you are getting WebRoot as part of your managed service packages from Next I.T right now. You may have gotten Viper in the past. Some other basic antivirus protections that you'll hear about are Norton. I think everybody has heard about Norton these days, and McAfee. And if you watch a lot of television, you'll also probably remember like PCmatic, and you hear some of those types of about those types of products. And the basic antivirus protection packages are really kind of all based on the same technology. It's really based on having virus definitions. So as threats are identified out there in the real world, then they're documenting the characteristics of those viruses and malware. They're loading them into a database, and then the virus program is accessing that database to do comparisons. And then once a comparison is found live in a system, then what it does is it does a quarantine. It has some remediation capability, right, if you want to delete it or not, and things like that. And so for a long time, the race has been to have the best, basic antivirus protection based on who can get the databases updated the quickest, who can have the most threats identified, the quickest. But the unfortunate part about it today is that a lot of your malware and attacks are starting to be mimic the operating system. And so what I mean by that is, that the Windows operating system, let's say, or your Mac operating system has characteristics of how it operates. And because of the hackers getting more sophisticated, they're actually starting to design attacks that mimic the behaviors of the operating system. And so unfortunately, in a basic antivirus model, you've only got definition protection, right? So it has to be something identifiable. Well, if you're developing threats that are mimicking operating system behaviors, we don't want an antivirus program going in and quarantining and shutting down an operating system, because obviously it takes the whole system down, right? And so that's the threat, and that's the trick that you have to really start addressing now is, as we look at these antivirus protections in an advanced layer, they're doing more of what's called machine language or behavioral analysis of viruses. And so what it does is it actually goes in and identifies things that are behaving like an operating system, but maybe showing some inconsistencies to that process. And then it's identifying it for us, but now it takes manual intervention, right? So a human has to go in and say, is this the operating system, or is this a malware attack or something that's threatening to my environment? And so more and more, it's going to require that differentiation and that human interaction to determine whether it's a virus or whether it's just the operating system behaving the way it is. And so you'll hear about companies like Komodo and IOBIT and Sophos, and a lot of them are developing this machine language in some of their advanced malware and antivirus protection softwares. And so we really are at a point where as a business, I think we need to look at the need for that higher level of protection and see if it makes sense. And again, these are all, cost versus benefit analysis type things. But when you look at the statistics on attacks that we talked about earlier, I think at some point every business is going to have to make that move, and it really comes down to a matter of when, not if. And so hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding about the difference between the two types of antivirus and what your opportunities are to secure up your security by taking advantage of one of those. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about some proactive technologies now. Some of the things that we're using already, some of the things that we're starting to add to our layers of protection. And we really want to start shifting that paradigm from being reactive to proactive, right? And I think that really is the thing that we're talking about a lot these days, is that so often the threat is already executed, the malware is already launched, right? So we're already experiencing the business damage that comes along with these technologies. And so as we start to layer a more proactive layer into our threat analysis and into our behaviors, I think we're going to be able to reduce the downtime. We're going to be able to reduce the number of threats, right? And we're going to take care of a lot of those things. And so one of the things that all of Next I.T's customers, I think, have right now is the Open DNS or the Cisco Umbrella product. And that's really, I think, a really first step in making sure that your base layer of security is in place. The Open DNS is a very nice product. It's on your servers in general, and what it does is it's kind of filtering your DNS traffic, all the things that are coming into your server before it actually gets there to your firewall and your network. And so Cisco has created this database called Talos. It's a global database, and they're constantly entering the threats that they identify into the database. And one of the nice things about the filtering is that your firewall works pretty hard already from all the filtering that it has to do with all the incoming traffic. And this really lightens up that load quite a bit. It makes your network perform much better. So there's some performance benefit to it, but also it cleans up a lot of the common junk that's out there. So all the common threats, a lot of the things that people are aware of, it's getting rid of a lot of those things before it ever gets to your server and network. And it really is not just a great security tool, but a great performance tool. And then along with the Open DNS product, there's a desktop product here, or a device product called Cisco Umbrella, and it works in combination with the Open DNS. And I think probably the best way to explain it, because our time is so short today, is really, let's say you have the Umbrella agent, roaming agent loaded to your laptop, and you get malware on your laptop. You open up an email that launches a malware attack. Well, the first step that a malware typically takes is it calls back to the host, and it starts getting instructions on how to perform the attack from the malware. And so it has to be able to get back out to the internet and do a callback, as it's called. And so what happens is the Umbrella roaming agent will sense that callback, it will block it first of all, so that it's not able to execute in a perfect environment. And then it's going to give you an alert that you've had this situation happen, so it can be remediated before the malware launches and then spreads to other devices and into your network and all the things that that it does. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of you may know already, I've said this a lot to a lot of you that I work with, is that malware can pretty much get to anything that you're authorized for on the network. So if you are an administrative user and get malware and you have access to the entire network, you actually can spread the malware across the entire network and cause that much damage to the data. We have large organizations with 900 users that have had 24 terabytes of data hijacked, let's say, because of a malware attack and the person was logged in as an administrator. And so while we have to have those administrative passwords to do our work, in many cases, we want to make sure that we're limiting our access as much as possible. So if you're an administrator who has activities that are not administrative related, maybe you set up a second password for yourself so that you can have that second password and only use that one when you're doing other things, right? Especially if you do personal things or if you're doing things on the internet or things like that with your work device, having that limitation of spread is also a really nice feature of that. So there's something to think about for all those that have administrative passwords. But the combination of the OpenDNS and the umbrella really does give you a really great layer of protection. And again, those are not expensive tools to put in your devices, and so it's not going to cause you a big business expense. All right. The second thing I want to talk about is really, it's been around for a while now, but really it's starting to emerge as part of the base layer of security now, and that's talking about an Advanced Threat Protection Managed SOC. SOC stands for Security Operations Center, and this is what I talked about earlier with the advanced antivirus as well, where there is a need for more human interaction in security now. And so what the products in the SOCs provide is they provide behavior analysis, threat analysis, and it's to a layer beyond what the advanced packaged out-of-the-box virus protections have. And so it's constantly monitoring 24/7 all the activities on the network. It's identifying threats, and then it's giving you feedback and asking you whether you want to act on those threats, ignore those threats, or or whatever it is that you need to do to protect your network. And so from a business standpoint, this is probably the one that I think moving forward, everybody really has to think about how they want to manage this. There definitely is an on-premise model where you can hire staff. You are going to have to add staff and training probably if you decide to do your own managed security operations center. But there's also plenty of opportunities to have that sourced out. Companies like Next I.T, we're going to start doing that as part of our packages that's available starting this week. So we actually will have staff that will be monitoring these tools. We're going to be using a tool called Huntress. You'll hear about that, and there is going to be a webinar on Huntress on that schedule that we had at the beginning of the meeting. So if you're interested in more technical information or more about that product, you can join us for that webinar. But the managed SOC is going to be a very important part of your security operations, and having human resources that are able to determine whether something is a safe operating or if it's a threat is going to be very important. And so want to make sure that you're aware of those technologies. And as we do our BTRs with you guys and the meetings that we do, we'll definitely be talking about that more and more. So we want to start pursuing those conversations right away if we can. And then the last part about the proactive technologies here that I've got is next generation firewalls. And a lot of you who have the Cisco ASAs, or if you have Sonic walls or some of those types of technologies, you already have what's called a next gen firewall. And basically the next gen firewalls offer a lot of software support that the old firewalls didn't. So let's say, for instance, for all those of you who have an ASA, if you want some additional email security, there's a product called AMP that we can load to your firewall. Most of the firewalls that we implement, we include the firepower services with now, and that gives you some more additional software security. And so the firewalls have become very sophisticated, and they have a really flexible software platform that we can modify and change as the threats modify and change. And we definitely want to be aware of that as well. So if you don't already have one of those firewalls, you should be looking into them. And if you do already have one, you can talk to your BTA, Keith, John, myself, about how you want to add software to that. All right, so let's talk a little bit of business real quick. We're almost wrapped up. I know we just got 3 or 4 minutes left in our time, but how do I address these needs in my business? For those of you who are here who are business leaders, finance people, and technical people, there's a couple things I just want to leave with you guys. Next IT is going to be enhancing our Next Care packages, and those are going to be available, like I said, this week. So those of you who are doing managed services with us, you'll have access to all these features and all this support and all the different things we talked about today. You'll have those available through your managed services contracts. For those of you who are not doing managed services with us and doing just projects and things like that, we definitely can help you deploy the tools, and we can definitely help you build the business processes and the things that you need to support your business. But from all businesses, really from a standpoint of all businesses, there's a few things I wanted to just talk about real quick. And first of it is penetration testing. For those of you who are in technology, you understand that there's tests that you can conduct on your networks where people try to come in from the outside and hack your networks, and they'll try to see where your vulnerabilities are at. We have a really great program for that. And I want to recommend to everyone on this call today that you look at doing that annually. The second item is for your finance people is budgets. For those of you who do your IT budgets, I think it's really important that you start budgeting for system security. This is not something that's really optional anymore. And it's one of those things where a lot of folks, we haven't had that in our budgets very much because there's always Antivirus was included in this and we got this and that, but really a full security portfolio is going to require some additional financial investment at some point for you. And we want to make sure that we do that. Cybersecurity insurance, getting a lot of questions about cybersecurity insurance. And my short answer for today, because our time is short, is I think that everyone should look into cybersecurity insurance now. It is definitely, the liability is definitely high enough now and the risk is high enough now where having that protection can save your business. We've had several businesses in my area this year that have closed down because they were, their data was hijacked and they couldn't afford the ransom, or the payment of the ransom caused them to lose their business, or they didn't get their data back and they had to shut down. So we definitely want to make sure that we're insuring our businesses now. And then the last thing is industry compliance and liability assessments. If you are performing NIST type work in manufacturing, if you're doing HIPAA for healthcare and those types of things, you definitely want to look at the compliance and liability assessments, and we can help you facilitate those or get you in touch with people who can do those, because you want to make sure that you're meeting your industry requirements. I know with NIST, let's say, if you don't show progress in your NIST security over time, then you're not eligible for government contracts, let's say. So it can cost you some business now. And of course, the fines from HIPAA compliance violations and things like that are getting pretty steep. So we want you to look at that as well. I know our time has been short today. Hopefully we've hit a lot of good points for you, or you learned a couple things. And if you want some follow-up, we've got your contact information listed up here. I know that most of you are already clients, so that you know who we are, know how to get a hold of us. But get a hold of John or Keith or I, and we definitely want to get all your questions answered. And as we start meeting with you guys and getting back to work, we're going to definitely want to talk about a lot of these things we talked about today.
Hey, thanks, Jerry. We ran a couple minutes over. Apologize to anybody that had that 12 o'clock meeting. We'll let you go. We've got a couple of questions here. If you want to stick around, Jerry and I will talk about a couple of questions, and then we'll be following up with you all as well later. And a lot of thank yous in the question and answer session, Jerry. One question that I haven't seen before that I think is applicable, right, is how do we handle multi-factor authentication on iPads, right? Jerry, do you have a direct answer on that? I've got some insight on how you would handle it with applications, but just the iPad is a different thing, right?
Yes, the iPad is a little bit different. I know that for Apple ID, for instance, Apple support, they provide a two-factor authentication for your Apple ID itself. There are some apps that you can download on your iPad. One is called a Microsoft Authenticator. Duo is also available for your iPad. So a lot of the same great products that we're using on the PC platform, you can use on the Apple platform as well. And those will work on iPhones, iPads, iPods, anything with iOS 9 or later will typically run those things for you, okay?
Yeah, and I've had some conversations with other specialists in this area, and a lot of times the multi-factor authentication is applied to your application and not your device. So when I log into email, I have to enter a password, and then that's asking me for a multi-factor authentication. A lot of the confusion we see with things like iPads is all of those passwords are already previously stored. So as soon as you get into your iPad, then you're into all of your applications. And that goes along some of the lines of our single sign-on applications that we can help manage as well. Another question that I had is probably a good one, maybe if people haven't done it before. How long does penetration testing take?
So in the engagement that we do, it's kind of varies. So we do a kickoff meeting with you as the client, and we review all the key points of your infrastructure and the things that you want to do. That's typically about a 2-hour meeting to start out with. And then based on the scope that we come up with, and based on the size of your network and things like that, it typically will take the penetration testing team somewhere between 2 and 5 days to complete. 2 on a small network and 5 to 6 on a larger network. And then once they do that, they'll need a couple hours to put together the reports and do their analysis. And then they actually generate a really nice PDF or Microsoft Word document for the review meeting. And then you get to keep that as well. And in that report, it'll talk about the things they tested, their findings, and then it'll also make some really great recommendations. So for instance, in our last client that did one of these tests, they had a lot of their ports blocked, which is a very good thing, right? And what the penetration testing folks said was that you realize that when you block a port, that it actually lets the hacker know that there is a port there, and that you're just blocking it, and it gives them a chance to maybe attempt another kind of attack on it. Whereas if you just have it not respond to anything, then the hacker doesn't even know that the port is there. Little things like that can make all the difference in your security. And so a typical review meeting will take a couple, 3 hours. It's that detailed, and unless you don't have a lot of issues. But it's really not about as many threats and issues as it is about opportunities just to shore up your network as well. And so I've not run one of these engagements yet that have not come up with some really great suggestions. And then in most cases, we can implement those changes, within a week or two, and it really makes a difference in your security pretty quickly. So, and the cost is not really that bad either. It's not too expensive for the hours you get, so it's good.
Another question we had on the multi-factor authentication is that something that's handled by the firewall or managed by a separate application? So both Jerry and I can talk about this. We use, when we're working from home, we connect into a VPN network, and that connects us to, a machine down in our corporate network. And then when I try to load my desktop, that's when it asks me for the multi-factor authentication, right? So before I get any access to any information on the network, I have to log in as a user, and then it'll say, okay, we're pushing you a notification, please enter your notification in. That's where the multi-factor authentication happens there. So it is running by an application and not specifically by the firewall. Anything to add on that, Jerry?
Sure. In the situation that John was just explaining, we're logging in through a VPN. We actually use the Duo product in conjunction with the firewall. So it's not a part of the firewall. It's a separate software package, but it's used in conjunction with the firewall to protect that VPN connection and the access to that. Because what John's explaining is we're going into a terminal server, and terminal servers, especially ones that are internet facing, are some of the most vulnerable technologies that we have out there. If you have a terminal server that is facing the internet, you definitely want to have a multi-factor authentication product on it. And you also never want to use the default port for the terminal server. I think 25 is the port that a typical Microsoft terminal server gets set up at. But you want to change that port number as well and have it run off a different port, because there are actually hackers out there scanning for those ports. And so terminal servers are some of the most vulnerable technologies that we have. And so you definitely want to use those products when in conjunction with those. They also provide a lot of convenience and really nice user interface to people who are working remote. So a lot of companies use it, but you definitely want to protect it these days.
I have had a couple comments about people that have either experienced an attack in their company or know others that have experienced attacks in their company, and just wanted to remind all the users of how painful it is. There's quite a bit of data that has to be recovered when you restore from a backup, which is the best way to manage an attack. And then somebody mentioned that they know of a company that didn't report, right? So back to your point, Jerry, you know, the reporting is only as good as what we hear. There's a lot of hacks, I think, that go unreported. And end users know the difference between virus and operating system. Okay, this was more of a jovial comment. A lot of our end users are really struggling to figure out where to put their files. So nope, end users aren't doing that. That's why all of you have put your trust in Next I.T to manage that for you. We've got a great staff in our network operations center, security specialists, server specialists, network specialists that all stay up to date on the most current information. But that's all the questions we have, Jerry. Anything else as we close? Still got a lot of people on the line.
Awesome. Well, I really wish that we were sitting in a conference room today with maybe some cookies and water and sodas on the things. You know, I'd like a little more normal business conferences to start again. This quarantine stuff has really got me missing all you guys. I do appreciate you making the time. And again, I know it's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but we want to just kind of pack it all in. And then again, there are more seminars and webinars coming up to want to jump in on. Let us know if you need the schedule again. We'll get that to you. And really appreciate everybody's time today and look forward to working with you guys on your security, and just have a great day and a good lunch.
You can all go out to Next I.T's webpage, and we have an events section on the webpage that has all the schedules for the upcoming webinars, and just sign up for one of those webinars and we'll shoot you the information and even send a reminder the day before. Thank you everyone for joining. That concludes our security bootcamp. Hope to see you in a future webinar.
Have a great day.